On September 12th, 1962, America had not yet landed a single person on the moon. The technology wasn't ready. The rockets hadn't been proven. And yet President John F. Kennedy stood in front of roughly 40,000 people and said,
"We choose to go to the moon."
So how do you convince people to believe in something that hasn't happened yet? How do you convince politicians and students to invest their time and money into something which seems technologically impossible? Let's dissect it. First things first, this isn't a speech about space. Kennedy is pitching a national goal that was extraordinarily expensive, technologically uncertain, and difficult to explain. His solution is fascinating. He doesn't spend the bulk of his speech telling his Americans that the moon landing will be easy. Instead, he does something exponentially powerful. He makes that difficulty the primary reason to achieve it. Let's play the first clip so that we can get a better idea on Kennedy's method and what exactly he's trying to do. So let's get started.
There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal?
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? Those questions are performing enormous rhetorical work in the broader scheme of things. Kennedy knows what his audience is thinking. Why are we spending this money to put a man on the moon? Instead of pretending that question is non-existent or merely lying and performing a political scheme, Kennedy asks it himself. He takes the audience's question and says it vocally. And then, as we'll see in the next clip, he will provide a beautiful answer to that question. This is a powerful technique for any sort of speech. If your audience already has a question in mind, don't run for it. Bring it into your speech. Let's continue.
And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas?
That last line was objectively brilliant. And not because it's hilarious. It's brilliant because of its locality. Why does Rice play Texas? For context, Kennedy is speaking to Rice students in Houston at Rice Stadium. He could have made another generic reference about the love of exploration, humans' thirst for knowledge. Instead, in this climactic scene, he gives the audience something that is familiar to them. He is transforming something generic into something personal, making the audience more in tune. That is adapting to your audience. Know where you're speaking, who you're speaking to, and give them something only that audience is going to understand. In my opinion, it makes your speech feel more personalized and more on the spot rather than something that was scripted and formally delivered. It just adds that extra depth.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Okay, that was a lot to unpack. This is arguably the most impactful and most quoted section of Kennedy's beautiful speech. He starts off with that build-up. Why climb the highest mountain? Why fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? And then, as his voice slowly increases in its strength, its impact, he gives that line. We choose to go to the moon. He doesn't just say this once. He repeats it 3 total times. And he isn't just repeating this beautiful and bold sentence because he ran out of words. He is creating rhythm. Each time he repeats, reinforces his bold thesis and decision. It connects the main point of his entire speech. Listen to the difference. If I were to say, we choose to go to the moon, that sounds bland. It doesn't create the rhythm. It doesn't drive up the emotion. But by repeating himself, instead of creating redundancy or monotony, he is repeating it with impact, with a pause after each iteration. That repetition creates emphasis. Now we have the second part of this line. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. In my opinion, this is the most important line in his entire speech. You have easy versus difficulty. Kennedy could have said, we can go to the moon because I'm sure we as a nation can do it, because America is a beacon of progress and freedom. That's not what he says at all. He takes that obstacle, that brutal difficulty, uses honesty and transforms it into the argument itself. The difficulty isn't something standing between America and the goal. The difficulty is why his goal matters. This is an incredibly persuasive technique. When you're persuading someone or a group of people to do something difficult, don't sugarcoat it. Don't just brush it off. Explain why overcoming those challenges will yield a high reward. Now next, let's analyze the aftermath of this climax, because Kennedy does something that only reinforces his message.
Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
What Kennedy is doing is he's integrating a structural element. Note the lines. Because that goal is willing to serve and organize the measures of our energies. Because that challenge is one we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. Kennedy keeps on adding another layer to his emotional staircase. First, he wants them to accept. He wants his audience to know that he's unwilling to postpone. And then, he drives it home that this is a challenge. He's going to win. Each phrase is slightly stronger than the one that came before it. And then comes the shortest, strongest word. Win. This is what I call a rhetorical staircase. Don't just give your strongest idea or your core thesis right off the bat. Build up towards it so that it is worth reaching. Now, we'll fast forward a bit in Kennedy's speech to look at one last thing that I think is extremely important. So let's continue.
But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body.
This is not vague inspiration. Kennedy moved away from offering passionate rhetoric. Now he's actually diving into the practicality, and this, in my opinion, is what makes it such a good speech. You have some speeches that are purely rhetorical analysis. They just say their points. Kennedy is giving his audience an imagery, a movie. You can almost envision that rocket. You can feel the scale. You can imagine that heat. This is one of the biggest differences than merely telling someone something is impressive and actually making them experience it. Let's play the final portion of Kennedy's oration in this selected section.
And then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
Listen to that beautiful acceleration. Kennedy starts off in a calm, composed manner. But then he states, and to do all this, and to do it right with such passion and such drive, it's no wonder everybody supported Kennedy's mission. He started off by stating, do all this, do it right, do it first, be bold. The sentences start getting shorter and shorter as he gets more passionate and passionate. Kennedy has spent a total of 2 whole minutes in ironing out the details of the space mission, trying to flesh out the practicality, giving his audience imagery they can experience. But now, he compresses anything into 2 simple words. Be bold. So here's how you could steal Kennedy's technique without actually copying him. Take an ambitious idea, then answer 3 questions. First, why do this? What question is your audience already asking that, frankly, you can answer? Secondly, why is this hard? What obstacle makes achieving your goal difficult or daunting? And last but not least, why do it now? Why should your audience care today? Why should they go back home at the end of the day and just have that call to action within their mind? And then build your speech towards 1 sentence that answers all 3. Don't just tell people what you want them to believe. Make them see why it matters. Kennedy didn't know what the journey to the moon would look like, but he understood something about persuasion. People don't follow a vision because it's easy. They follow it because someone makes it feel worth attempting. And that is the gist of Kennedy's speech, "We choose to go to the moon." Once again, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment, or share. Otherwise, have a great day.